Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we have a returning guest. We have Evan Kidwell joining us again. And Evan's first presentation was really kind of a day in the life of an account manager or an account manager experience around group long-term care and more, of course. Evan's first session was a fan favorite. You know, I think it gave a really good look inside what the role is and what the different tasks are in the day-to-day of that role, and just in general, working within the overall ecosystem of group long-term care. And so I thought 1 year on, it'd be great to hear from Evan again on just kind of what he's learned as he's been able to build on what he started with us in a big way. So, Evan, I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to speak to everybody. Um, so, I think a great place to start would be like, what's new? We're a year removed-ish from the last time you did this presentation. I know we were starting with really just kind of one account, but I know that's kind of grown in a big way, and you've got a lot of other projects as well. So I think a year out, how are you feeling now compared to even back then?
Well, first of all, I'm feeling really good. It has been busy, but in a good way, as we kind of hinted at the beginning of the call. And I'm finding myself, first of all, I love this space, right? Just in general, not just the long-term care, but anytime you can get something not going through the underwriting process, that is a really fun space to be in. And I'm finding myself having more and more of these conversations every day. I actually just had another one just yesterday. And the truth of the matter is, every person you come in contact with is in some version of an association. And if we're talking just association plans in general, no associations are bringing these kinds of benefits to their people that are in their association, their members, right? And
Hmm.
so it is a completely open marketplace from that standpoint. And when I explain to people what I can bring to their association, they're like, "Wait, that's amazing! Like, yes, I want that." Right? So I think that is it's just gotten more and more fun the more I'm learning about this process and the products that are involved, and it becomes less of a sale and just education, which I actually prefer anyways. I can sell, but I'd much rather just be, what questions do you have? And, what do you want to know about the product? What do you want to know about the offering? And when I reiterate the no underwriting component, a lot of people are like, that's crazy. I'm going to sign up right now. Okay, great, go do that. Right. So no pressure in this world. From my experience in the last year, just really just educating them, walking them through the offer, what it means, how they access it, and then what's the right fit benefit wise for them. So
Yeah, and we've been working closely together for a good while now, and this is not to say that you weren't confident in the beginning. You know, I know you to be a confident person around whatever you're talking about, but I've seen your confidence grow as you've started to get your feet wet more and more and more. And one of the things I wonder is, does that make it easier in all of your future conversations that you have? Do you find that the process has gotten easier because of your experience? Things of that nature, like now that you've got a couple under your belt that we've been working with.
when I first engaged with you guys a little bit over a year ago, Mark Glickman said, "Great, but if you're going to take this role, you need to know how to do the quotes and you need to know how to go to the carriers." And I'm like, that feels like a little bit too much, Mark. Can't you like kind of help teach me how to do that the first couple of these that we do? And now it's funny because even my conversation with somebody yesterday, I said, "Hey, look, my team and I mean, you guys are my team, Buddy INS is my team." I said, "My team and I will do everything for you if you want, or we'll do nothing for you if you want. But at the end of the day, the goal is to get in front of the association. But if you want it, we can help with the education, the marketing, the training, the." And he said, "Well, what I'd really like is to just introduce you and then have somebody else do all of the demos and conversations." So I said, "Great, then this sounds like a great partnership," right? So
Right.
it is, yeah, my confidence has definitely gone up, and I know how to do the quoting now. It's really not that complicated. It was just about a matter of partnering with you and Mark, and you guys have been more than gracious with your time. I think I've had a conversation with you at least once every week for the last year at least.
Yeah,
So
at least,
it's
yeah.
so you guys have been
So
a
I do
wealth
want
of
to ask you
knowledge.
about that piece of the experience, though, the quoting process, because you hit the nail on the head. We do help people kind of walk step by step through that quoting process the first time, first couple of times, whatever it may be. Um, but can you just give folks who maybe haven't even gone through the quoting process at this moment just kind of a look into it from a boots on the ground perspective? You know, people can learn from Mark and I all the time just by sitting here and being talking heads, but somebody other than us who's experienced that piece of the process, I think it's really important to kind of get their perspective.
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to note that to get a quote from the carriers, you really don't need all that much information. You need very, very minimal information. The high level ones are, first of all, which association are you going after? Okay. Uh, when were they produced? Like when were they established? And what are their member counts? Like how many members do they have? All of those things, by the way, you can usually find on their website. Um, you might have a really great relationship, and you can ask the person you have that relationship with as well. And the last one that's the most important is the bylaws, which most of the time you can find those on the website too. So it's really all information you can get online yourself. And so really when I'm talking to somebody who wants to bring this to the table, because I work with a lot of different agents across the country, I just say, hey, look, at the end of the day, if you have an association you're part of, or if you know somebody who has an association they're a part of, we can bring this kind of offer to the table. Once I have those four pieces of data, the more the data, the better for sure. Like if
Sure.
we can get member data as far as male female ratios or as far as average income, that kind of stuff. But just the basics is really all you really need. Everything else you can get on their website, because when you do a quote, it'll ask for things like, what's their mission statement? Guess what? The About Us page almost always has it on the website, right? So all findable, easy information to gather. The guy I was talking to yesterday, he was explaining his process is he's used to going and basically convincing somebody to make him the enrolled agent or the this is my agent, right? And I'm used to that process as well. But I said, well, why don't you have the relationship with the association already, okay? Rather than going through the hoops of I'm your guy every time, why don't you just go get an offer, bring it back to the association, and say, I got this for you. Do you want it? And he goes, oh my gosh, I've never heard anyone do that. And I was like, well, that's how I've done it for a couple of my associations, right? So it can be as simple of a process as you want it to be, and it can be as complicated of a process as you want it to be. But you're the one driving that. You're the one controlling that. So
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Evan is an all-star with us on the association side. I think most of the people on this call will generally be working with employers, but you kind of had, I guess a reverse trajectory of many people. You started with a good association opportunity, and what really helped you there, I think, is the associations you're working with are right up our alley, like trade
right.
associations that are localized to one state. They've got that insurance arm or sales team that's really dedicated to making a difference from the communications perspective. They have great relationships with the members, but you've parlayed that into employer group offerings and
Mhm.
enrollments as well that have also been very, very successful. And I think one of the lessons that you can really draw from that is strength of relationship matters.
Right.
And those have kind of proven out. So you took the association's employees and actually offered group long-term care to them. Do you want to just give a little bit on that experience, how it came about, and what you think led to it being a success?
The answer I'm going to give you is probably not the awe and shock answer that everyone's looking for.
Sure, sure.
I try to keep my ears open to opportunities when they potentially come up. That's how this opportunity came up in the first place. And when we were in the process of helping the members, we had somebody from the team who was an employee of the team say, "Well, can I get this?" And I said, I don't know. Let me go find out. Let me see what that process looks like, right? And so, and then obviously, you and Mark were like, yeah, we can absolutely do groups too, not just associations. That's actually where we usually work. And I said, okay, great. So then we went through that process of, and that one took months of, hey, wait, don't sell our people. Let's get on, on a call with everybody. Let's make sure that, we've heard something similar before. But again, we had the relationship, and so we ended up winning that one out. And so we did that for the employees as well. Now they've come back and said, "Hey, can we now do not just long-term care, but can we do for the same group all of the group level products, right? DI, life insurance, health insurance, dental, vision, all of that kind of stuff." So it's kind of just building out from there. This is one particular association I'm working with, but I have several irons in the fire now that this has started. So it was more about listening for a need and helping somebody solve that need than it was about me even uh, thinking in that way, because that's not usually where I'm thinking. So
Right, right. And I think I can definitely vouch for that. Now I have one more question that I'm gonna ask Evan and anybody else in the audience. I encourage you, if you want an opportunity to ask somebody who's not Mark and I, who's had some really good boots on the ground experience about what it's like to be an account manager for an association or anything, or an employer or anything related to group long-term care, this is the person to ask. This is your time. Um, but Evan, I think it would be helpful if folks could get an idea of the experience as you're sort of moving from the actual sale to they've said yes to implementation all the way through to the end of the enrollment, because you have a really unique perspective in that yes, you're the account manager, you're that high level relationship person, you're the glue person, you're the go-between person between the association or employer and us and the carrier. You do a lot of that directing of traffic, but when it comes time to implement, you're also that long-term care specialist consultant
yeah,
who is meeting with the employees or the members one to one. So,
yeah.
can you just kind of talk about that overall experience, what you think is super important to know or for execution of that?
Yeah. So, first of all, your question had about five questions in it, so I'll
It
try to
did.
address each one of them at a time.
It
So,
did. Well, you start with whatever tickled your fancy there, and I'll fill you in on ones we may have gone over.
okay. Okay, sounds good. So, first of all, people think that the process itself is complicated. It's as simple as getting a quote to start. That's the first step, is get the quote done. Then the very next step after that is going to be a marketing meeting with Buddy INS and their marketing team of sorts. We have to figure out what they're currently doing, how they're currently marketing, how they're currently reaching out to their current population of people. My advice would be basically use what they're already using, because if you start calling them but they've never called their people, that's a disconnect, right? If they only call their people and you email them, that's a disconnect, right? So you want to get in the same minds with our marketing team here at Bud ANS, as well as their marketing team as well. From there, you're going to set up, I'll call it logistics. When's the enrollment happening? What's the likely date of enrollment? When, why, all that kind of stuff. And they give you a date. They say, why don't we just do October during our normal enrollment? Which, by the way, if you guys are in this space for very long, you'll realize that's probably not a great idea, right? Off anniversary is usually the best idea. And then once you have a date, then you have to kind of back into, okay, and then what's the administrative process that Bud ANS team has after the fact? When's the plan officially go in force? That kind of stuff. Um, Jason has a tremendous ability to put together I don't even know what you call it, Jason, but basically like a deep dive into any
Survival guide.
offer, a survival guide. And it literally is that, a survival guide. I live off of the survival guide, Jason. You may not know that, but I do, right? And so when Jason puts together the survival guide, it's usually months before this plan goes into force. And it's months before you've even started really marketing. But you're going to be walking a step with their marketing team. You're going to be having a plan with Gretchen over on the Buddy INS team. And then the survival guide is your key. And what I do is I go through the survival guide and then I have a litany of questions that I end up asking Jason, right? I call him up. I'm like, hey, what does this mean? Hey, does this mean what I think it means? Right? I learn the product. I understand what the product is all about, how it moves, how it ticks, and what's important. And then from there, um, you know, that takes its own version of learning. But once you learn it once, you've pretty much got it down. The products don't usually change all that much, right? So, and then when you're sitting there meeting with the actual professionals, what you'll find is you actually get a lot of the same questions over and over. So I actually built a presentation just the other day to speak to the association members, and I actually went through the presentation from a product standpoint, but from a point of these are the most common questions I get. And once you kind of understand what those most common questions you get are going to be, it's going to be able to help shape your entire presentation with any professional that you're working with in that way. Most people just want to know what it's about. What is it about? Why is it important? And actually, nowadays, the appetite for long-term care is so high. I think there's a lot of younger people, myself, age-wise, who are dealing with parents in a long-term care situation. The baby boomers are either retiring or getting older, and they've had firsthand experience with that. And I've even gotten the question before, like, well, can I get this for my parents? My parents need this. Can I get this for my parents? And obviously, the answer to that is no, but they're actively thinking about it. So the sale itself is not very hard once they understand why they need it. The only other thing to remember is maybe have a basic understanding or knowledge of how DI insurance works, because I have gotten the question like, oh, this is DI, right? Do I need to? I already have DI. I don't need this. Different, right? They're different things, and being able to explain or enunciate why they're different and how they're different. One is for replacement of income, and one is to cover costs of care should you need care, right? And so helping people understand the distinction between those, and then also being ready and equipped for, I'll call it objections, more like misunderstandings, like, oh, I'm too young. I don't need that, right? Being able to have narratives around that. You're never going to be younger than you are right now, right? Those kinds of narratives, and show them the value of premiums now at age 40 versus the premiums at age 60 if they were to pursue it at that point. So, and then from there, you, Jason and Buddy team have made it really easy. They literally click enroll. They go through the application. It is as simple as that. So I help people understand that my job is to educate. And at the end of it, if they want the plan, they just say yes, they want it. And it becomes very simple, which is why I'm really liking the guaranteed issue space. So I think that answered all of the questions that you asked about along the way process.
Yeah, I think that was a super good perspective. I would say what really stands out to me in explaining how you're able to perform when you're working with groups is that you over communicate. And I don't
Yeah.
mean over communicate as in you communicate too much. I think what I mean by that is if there feels like there's a disconnect or a misunderstanding or even just something slight that you want interpretation on, you would rather communicate and not let that go versus make an assumption and move on, which I
Yeah.
think is super important. It's helped you learn a lot quicker, but it also gives us a lot of information that we can do a lot with, right? Because a lot of what you're relaying is feedback from the street, you know,
Right.
actually out there coming from clients. So that's helped us really understand what people are asking about, what they want in a product. Um, and yeah, just digging into those materials, I think the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And
Yep.
I definitely saw that because Evan and I met up a couple of weeks ago at a convention for one of the associations that Evan is working with, and his presentation was excellent. It was excellent. I was actually very, very, very impressed because you were able to keep it simple because you have a level of thoughtfulness around what are people asking,
Mhm.
right? What in my experience have I been confronted with and how have I learned to present it? And I'm just going to keep it pretty straight to that. And after the presentation was over, we tried to go back to the booth, and I don't think we could without three, four people coming up to us and wanting 5 to 10 minutes
Right,
to talk about, right?
right.
Lots of questions, people trying to drill into a situation that you know is their own personal situation or a loved one's personal
Right.
situation, right?
Yeah.
So I think the fact that you keep it simple and a lot of the presentation, which made us very happy, was repurposing the existing assets, right?
Yeah.
Showing screenshots of the calculator, showing some of the most important little widgets on the enrollment landing page that you thought were important for people to take away. I think you use us very well. So
Mm.
I think if I could give feedback to the people on this call, how am I able to really grow and find success, whether it's employer groups, associations, whatever it may be, I would say over communicate, lean on us, and don't let anything just kind of slide. And maybe I won't get that question or I won't get that question again, whatever it may be. Because every little bit can kind of take you that extra mile.
Yeah.
Um,
And I will say too, um, at first, when I first started engaging, I was hesitant because I know how valuable people's time is, right? And so I would hesitate to reach out to Jason or I'd hesitate to reach out to Mark. And that was also its own learning game of, oh, it's Gretchen this time, oh, it's Sandy this time, oh, it's Jason this time, right?
sure.
But I got very comfortable very quickly because of the way you guys move your team of just calling them up. And if they don't pick up, I can send an email or I can send a text, right? Like I have ways of getting in touch with them. And it really lessened my guard of am I supposed to be reaching out or not? Reach out.
Well, I
The
can
Buddy
give you
Ines team wants
perspective
to.
as to why we want that. Um, at the end of the day, we need to scale this business, right? If we're going to help as many people as possible, be able to help as many people as possible. When we're dealing with the group space, we're dealing with groups of anywhere from 3 to 30,000, 100,000 plus people with these groups. I mean, totaling, they call it belly buttons, but totaling at least 1 million plus belly buttons. That's a lot to scale. So we need people who can take the reins like yourself to be able to handle a lot of the elements of their group relationships that we won't be able to micromanage as we have hundreds of like Evan-like groups, right? So when folks are willing to get their hands dirty, they're willing to ask us questions, they're willing to give feedback about the process, that's as good as gold to us because we know your knowledge and your confidence is going to climb to be able to kind of do it as low touch as possible, right? You're still going to report back. There's still going to be questions here and there. There's still going to be, how do I answer this email? I don't know what to do with my hands. There's still going to be that. But at the end of the day, it allows us to scale so much if we don't have to micromanage every piece of the process for everyone who comes to us with a group. That's
Yeah.
that's the value we see in that, and that's why we pick up, right? And that's why we'll always drop everything to be able to answer questions.
One of the other things that triggered for me when you were speaking just now is don't be afraid to go after. So like the employee group that I got, they didn't make very much money in that employee group. So they were not buying $200,000 limits. They were buying $25,000 limits. Like they were just buying something to get them started. So don't be afraid to go after even like blue collar type groups because something is better than nothing. And what I will say is if you do a search for all of your professionals that you work with, uh, and find out or ask them what associations they're a part of, that is a great way as an in way. And you already have clients that you're currently talking to that all have an association. Every single person that
Or are
on
a
the planet
business
is
owner.
a part of a business owner or an association, right? Like so, or groups that they're a part of. maybe they love to golf. I don't know, right? And you go, great. Do you know if there's a golfing association, right? Like there's things all over the planet, and it doesn't just have to be it doesn't just have to be the attorneys and the doctors, right? Although don't get me wrong, those are great people to work with too. I'm just saying it can be at this stage with the way these products are structured, it can literally be anyone. The question becomes, are you going to bring it to them or somebody else?
Yeah, yeah. And I think there are some things once you get into underwriting that they may say, hey, we don't really have a degree of comfort here. And, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? I would say, underwriting teams of these group carriers are generally going to want to stick to trade associations, but there's plenty of trades out there and there's plenty. I mean, it's like reaching into a portal to another dimension and seeing what you pull out. You never know what is going to, come across our doorstep.
Yeah.
And we're still going to take it as far as we can take it and try to help anybody who is an advocate, right,
Yeah.
for long-term care and wants to bring this planning.
Yeah.
Um, but do you want to talk a little bit more about the in-person experience we had a couple of weeks ago? Because for
Sure.
me, I spoke about this on another study group call. If it wasn't last week, it was the week before. But to me, that really demonstrated the type of association you should really be looking for and looking to work with. There
Hmm.
were so many things on the strength of relationship level. The fact that the insurance arm, the insurance team that we were working with for this association covered, God, it seems like every
Everything.
aspect of members' risk management. I mean, what are some of the things that you think make not just the events, but that association and insurance arm really successful?
Well, there's several things that make that kind of association successful. One, they built an environment where people come to them and ask them questions, and they'll say, "Can you tell me about my life insurance policy? Can you tell me about my PNC or my property and casualty or my my human resources department or whatever it might be?" They literally at that event specifically, I've never seen anything like it. I'm not saying that you need to find an event like this, but at that event, they go to buy this group of association members goes to buy and they come up and say, I need to do a policy review. Well, who does that? Nobody does that, right? Oh, let me sit down right now and do a policy review. It's strange. But I think there's some components on that team that really help. One, they have active marketing that they're already doing with their members, right? It is not a stick it on the shelf and be done and look at what have we got. No, they're actively engaging with their members saying, we brought this to you, right? There's a value in that. If it's just it's there, you're never going to get any sort of traction in that kind of group at all, right? Two is this particular organization has a sales team that really works with the members on the sales, but not necessarily the long-term care sales, just oh, let's get you a life insurance, or oh, let's get you a DI, or oh, let's get you property casualty, right? Like,
Risk
oh,
management training, right? I
risk
mean, I
management.
think
Oh, you need cybersecurity, right? Like,
we were sitting at the booth and we got I don't know, I would say 40 completely different inquiries from each other, and there was
correct.
somebody to sit down with each and every person for each and every one of those inquiries. I was amazed at how many got to a finished, action, right? I was
Absolutely.
just, it's like a bottomless pit of expertise. I mean, it was really, really impressive.
Yeah. I think the piece that, so again, be smart about this with your practices. Have your ear to the ground, right? Don't treat this as I'm going to just sit back and this is just going to happen to me. If you're just waiting for the phone to call, it's not going to be good, right? I think there are things to listen for. So one of the things I listen for in this group, so they've got their own sales team. They've got, now it's a massive group, so it makes sense, right? But they've got their own sales team. So I started asking questions about, well, how do like to the leadership that I have a relationship with, how do they why are they incentivized to tell somebody about the long-term care? And the first question I got back a year ago was, well, they're not. It's like, but I want them talking about the long-term care so that I get more of these calls, right? Or
And you have
I have more people
helpers.
to reach out. I have little helpers, right? Exactly. And they said, well, it's not part of our plan. Like it's not part of our world, right? It's just we refer them to you. And I said, yeah, but how? How can we make that part of their world? Turns out that group has a point system they use. Everyone's a salaried employee, and every employee gets these points, which go towards their bonuses and goes towards their incentives and every other product on the planet that they talk about gets a point every time they sell one of these things or offer one of these things, right? And then each salesperson needed 30 points per month to keep their call it salaries going or whatever you want to call it. And so I said, well, can we make the long-term care a point? Right. And at first there was pushback. They're like, no, we're not doing that. I was like, okay, why not? So I'm just inquisitive. I'm curious by nature, and I'm going to ask the questions. But I recognized a way that could have the sales team actually effectively working, helping me with the sales a little bit. And finally, they're like, you know what, you're right. Why wouldn't we? And I think that was actually after the first enrollment we did last year, where there was some success. And they're like, why wouldn't we incentivize our people to be offering this option as well? And again, they don't know anything about the long-term care; they just know it exists. And so they have that conversation with the associate member, and they go, yes, I want more. And then they go, okay, great, talk to Evan. Right. So that has been super helpful as well. But I don't know if you'll always find that level of engagement from the association and team. But the point is, they have a sales team, they have an education team, they have a marketing team. Those are all good things and feathers in our cap. Our marketing team here at Buddy IS actually works very closely with their marketing team pretty much on a weekly basis, making sure that the things that are getting sent out but that's important too, because if we're going to send it out, they won't know who we are. But if the association sends it out, they'll know who the association is. So that collaboration is really important as well. So
Yeah, and I think you're probably right that organizations to that level may be fewer and farther between. It's not like they're completely extinct and we're working with the only one on the planet, but it just speaks to a really good example culture
yeah,
of the organization, how they're used to interfacing with their members, how entrenched they are in their members' lives. They don't really look anywhere else for anything.
right.
Folks are coming up to us and saying, I've been with the organization, not even talking about the association at this point. I've been with the insurance organization for 20, 30, 40 years. I mean,
Right.
those are things that should set alarm bells off in your head that, okay, it's an organization that has really good strength of relationship with the association. They're obviously relationship builders. And
Mhm.
we have seen that in the time we've been working with them. I mean, it's coming close to 2 years, if it isn't already. And it's evolved to the point where, okay, we've started to meet each other, things are good. We kind of have clues that this is a really good team. We've had our members, we've had Mark and Wendy attend this conference, and then I attended this year. And from the beginning to now, it's like first we were just trying to offer something to the members, but now I have people coming up to me and thanking me and saying they remember me for helping educate them on their own plan as an employee.
Mhm.
So it really has kind of come full circle, and it's those associations who are really interested in the relationships that I think really help to make it worthwhile. Now,
Yeah.
Wendy, you sent me a DM, but I would like to remind you that you have an unmute button and a voice, and you're a respected member of this team. If you would
Oh,
like to
and I
ask.
know that. I wanted Evan to speak to commission because nobody works for free.
Yeah.
And you've been working with this association for a long time. You've got a great relationship. You have married that together through this. So I think one of the questions I get from different specialists, different agents, and certainly advisors, BGAs is, what do I get paid on this? Is it
Yeah.
worth my time to do 3 people? Is it better to do 1,000? 25,000. So can you talk about that just on that
Yeah.
basic?
So first of all, I will say I actually heard a congressperson say this once, and I've always held the example in my head. And I was live at an event with him and my father actually, and he said, everyone's fighting for the piece of their pie, right? Like everyone wants their piece of the pie. And he goes, but nobody has to fight for their piece of the pie if you have a pie making machine. Yeah, I like that. That's good, right? Like this is a pie making machine. I will say it really depends on what you're willing to do. If you're just doing the introduction to the association or to the group, that's a very different split than if you're going to jump on the call and do the demos and the training and the education with the individuals, right? And it's also a much different compensation if you're going to say, I'll take care of all of the marketing myself. I would encourage you not do that. I would encourage you leverage the Buddy INS team to do that, right? And so it's really going to depend on what roles you want to hold and what you're willing to do in that process. I know for me specifically, uh, because everyone wants a piece of it, right? I get a very low percentage on this group, and I'm doing the demos and stuff, but that's not Buddy's fault. That's mostly because the primary insurance carrier that was involved in putting this group together wanted a very big cut, right? Which makes sense. It's their relationship, and so, but I wasn't worried about that because one person might be able to say, "Oh well." Is it worth it then if you're getting a very small portion? And yes, because it's the law of large numbers, right? If you get 100 applications in or 200 applications in, even if you're getting a small amount, you start finding yourself in a decent spot from an income standpoint from that. So if you're involved, you will get split in on the case. How you get split in will depend on what your involvement looks like and what also not just what your involvement looks like, but also what the association you bring to the table, how much of a cut they want if they have an insurance arm, for example. So,
Yeah, and I think you're also somebody who understands the value of future opportunities
yeah,
too. That there is payment in opportunities and relationships that come out of it too. So
yeah,
I recognize that kind of forward thinking in you.
yeah,
Do you
Great.
have something to add there, Mark?
I was going to add, I mean, Evan, you said it very, very well. Whoever has the relationship ultimately is in that driver's seat to decide what services they want, how they want the group enrolled. So just keep that in mind. You just kind of have to work with who has the relationship. And that's how Buddy operates as well. We try to cater to who has the relationship and make it fit for them. And that's how we build these partnerships. And like Evan said, and Jason mentioned, a lot of future opportunities come from that. But make sure that you're getting paid for the time that you're committing to it, right? You're fairly compensated. And then thinking about like the total amount of commission being much higher on these groups. Some of these groups generate, over $1 million of annual premium and commissions. So even if you're getting a smaller percentage, like Evan said, that's still could be a six-figure, payment for you for the work you're doing.
Now, Mark, I asked Evan quite a few questions to just kind of get an idea of like his perspective, his journey, and what it looks like to kind of be an account manager and really specialist consultant through from beginning to end. But I'm interested to know if you have any questions for Evan or something that you would like to get his perspective on that you think would be a good teaching moment for everyone.
Well, I missed a big chunk of it, so I'm afraid I'm going to ask a question that you've already asked, Jason.
Well, we'll tell you to
But
skip it.
I'm curious, and tell me if it's already been asked, Evan, how you viewed the employer enrollment experience, which I think was relatively recent for you,
yeah.
versus the association, which you've been working with for some time now. How did that differ in your mind? Because I know a lot of people are going to have small employer groups more than they'll have associations on this call.
Yeah. So it was my very first employer group. We just finished it out a couple months ago, 2 months ago, whatever. It was a small employer group. I mean, it was the employees of the association, but it was about 250 employees, so it wasn't all that big. It was fascinating because I remember when we brought it to them, Mark especially was trying to be like, "Hey, we should have some version of this as employer funded, right? Because that usually helps with the people enrolling." And they said, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that." And I remember thinking, "Oh, is that good? Is that bad? I don't really know." And Mark goes, "Well, we're going to give it our best shot, and it is what it is. But usually, when it's full voluntary like this, we just don't see as much of a penetration from how many applications we get per the compared to the number of members or number of employees." And but their marketing team was all over it. Again, their sales team was not involved in this one because their sales teams are the employees. So I was the only one, not the sales team, right? But it was a really successful enrollment, and we had a 13% enrollment from that of applications coming out of a full voluntary plan with no employer paid for. The marketing helped quite a bit. Buddy INS helped quite a bit with that, and really was and again, some of these were $25,000 death benefit cases. Like they weren't huge cases, but it was still a very successful event from that standpoint. So I had a lot of fun doing it. I'm definitely going to want to pursue others as well. I think my gameplay is actually probably the reverse of most of your gameplays, and that is start with the association and go backwards, right, to the employees, or start with the association and then have the member come to me and say, well, can't I get this for my employees? Well, funny you say that. Yes, you can, right? Like, so again, just listening for the opportunities that come up. But yeah, I think both had a version of success that was very successful. And I was a little worried when it was full voluntary, and Mark was saying, "Oh, that's not in our best interest, but we'll make it work." But it ended up turning out great. But again, marketing and education was a big piece of that. So,
And it helped that this association was offering it to their members for close to a year
mhm.
and had learned the products well. This it also helped that they were in California and had the 5% compound inflation and understood long-term care to know the value of that.
Right.
So there were a lot of factors I think that really helped it being all voluntary. But if you were just to go from like last year, let's say we're doing it before they had done their association enrollment, we probably wouldn't have had as much success
Right.
as we did
That's true.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Getting
by
that
the
kind of
time we
runway
put that
going.
into place, you had already gotten inquiries, Evan, from some of the internal employees. Well, can't I own this?
Right.
So there was a lot of bricks that were laid on the foundation to
Yeah.
signal to us, hey, a voluntary enrollment, though not ideal, may actually have some good success here.
And full voluntary is actually a really easy sale because it's no sweat off the employer's back to bring that type of offer to the play, right? So it's I'm not saying always go full voluntary. That was how this one landed. Certainly, if you could get employer funded, you're going to probably have more participation, but you can make it work with full voluntary too. So
And this was a case where I think ACH was a preferable play because these
yeah,
were folks who were looking to buy and own and hold this plan. And
yep,
that's generally done a lot more headache free with
yeah,
ACH billing. To
yeah,
know that even if you separate from the employer, you're not going to have to worry about contacting the carrier, switching over from payroll deduction to ACH or some sort of direct billing. Right. So I think that was another huge plus that we
yeah.
were able to get done there.
And speaking of
Um,
ACH, this is just a side note because I get a lot of it from the people that are trying to sign up. If you are going through this plan, just be ready for the following questions which come up, and it's come up pretty consistently, which is, uh-oh, it asked me for my social security number. Uh-oh, now it's asking me for my bank information. Uh, and they freeze and they don't know what to do with that, right? Because they think nobody's supposed to be able to ask for social and billing information in the same app, right? Uh, I just got really good at explaining to people, guys, this is a life insurance policy. Any life insurance policy you're going to go get in the marketplace is going to ask you for personal information like social. And when you go to put it in force, it's going to ask you for banking information. This is just doing it all at once because this is instant approval. Like you just get what you want, right? So but just be ready for that ACH question because that is where the majority of the people would stop in their application is, uh-oh, this scares me. As soon as they talked to me about it, they understood and they were able to move forward. But if they're not talking to you about that question, they'll freeze and they'll stop doing their application at that point in time. So
yeah, and I think that's one of the most important things. We kind of went over it a bit, that has led to your success is you don't let anything go without filing it away once
yeah,
you've heard it. I get
yeah,
a lot of feedback from you from the field, and that actually means a lot to your level of success because you build and compound on what the next conversation may be like and how
Mhm.
you can help yourself by filing some of those things away. It helps you in higher level presentations as well. You know, you make sure to bring that to future discussions with anybody you may be talking to, um,
Right. Be a little
involved with the
preemptive
enrollment.
about once you start seeing the same questions over and over, start answering those questions before they come up and cause a disconnect in the, in whatever portion of the process they're in. So
Yeah, yeah, and you started working with us so early on that in many of these experiences we've actually had to learn together. And
yeah.
surprisingly, nobody exploded. And I think that's really due to kind of the interpersonality of it
Mhm.
in working together. We've had to find out a lot of things for the first time together.
Right.
And,
And it
you
still
know,
happens. It still
yeah,
happens.
it
Somebody will
still
ask me a question
happens.
I don't even know, and I'm like, let me go find out. Um, Little nuances inside the product where, like, you'll get the analyticals who will literally read every line item of the FAQs and every line item of the specimen documentation, and they go, well, what about this? And I'm like, ah, I don't know, right? But again, you have a team that backs you up. So you don't actually have to know, right? You can rely on the team. You can reach out to Jason and you can just tell them, I'm not sure about that. And I had many a conversation where I was like, you know what? That's the first time someone's asked me that. I don't know. Let me go find out. I'll get back to you. So
Yeah, and you know, there are several lines of defense when it comes to answering questions, and you're right, even still to today, we'll have a question that'll shoot like a bullet through the first three lines of defense.
yeah.
And we have to go straight to the carrier because it's a good question. We need to learn how to answer this question going forward. So I think, you know, not taking that for granted, not letting any employees kind of feedback or questions go is super, super important to just overall future success to everybody involved. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of known out there for folks to take away. And even when we're dealing with cases that have some underwriting, right? I mean, every enrollment you've done so far has some component of guaranteed issue. But
Mhm.
you've also seen, you know, trials and tribulations that come from underwriting, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's another thing that you do really well is you treat them as they are, your individual client, though they
Mhm.
are an employee um, of an employer group or they're a member of an association. At that moment, when they're consulting with you, as you're going through applications with them, whatever it may be, you treat them as if they're your individual client and you don't
Right.
rest until something's figured out. And I think that's part of the success too, is we meet every week so you can keep checking in on and keep, you know, kind of proving out whatever concerns and feedback that you get. So we make sure nothing goes without hitting the finish line. Because I know without somebody like you, somebody who would rather just kind of put their feet up and be passive, there's a higher likelihood that something just kind of, um, you know, goes longer than it needs to be before it's solved, or we find out about it in a different way that's not ideal, right? So I think that's another huge value to just kind of what you do and how you conduct yourself when working with groups.
Well, and I'm super grateful to the Bud ANS team too, because like I'll give an example here. One of the things that kept coming up was people would say, well, what are the exact questions that exist on if it's a simplified issue for my spouse, for example? Um, and honestly, I had like two or three of them because I was armed. I'd be like, oh, it's questions like this. And I'd give the, have you been hospitalized in the last 6 months? That's an easy one. Woohoo. And they're
Hmm.
like, but what are the exact six questions? So again, you're talking to an analytical. I don't know, right? And I didn't ever memorize all six because I didn't originally think I needed to. And then you guys are like, well, look, if you're getting that question enough, let's go ahead and just put that on the website where it says, here's your six questions that get asked. I was like, oh, that's super helpful. And then I could point people to it. Oh, see this little button here? Yeah, click on there. It'll show you the six questions. And we clicked on it. And like, oh, those questions are easy. Yeah, okay. Let's move forward with the application, right? So any barrier that I've come across as far as um, client facing barriers where they're putting up a wall because they don't want to complete it for whatever reason, your team has been incredible at making sure that that barrier is removed and putting that information on the website, either in the FAQs or in a specific button for those things, so that I could point to those later. And again, I didn't need to know all six of those questions by heart. And the nice thing about that one is different carriers have different questions, right? So I didn't have to know all six for all the carriers that we're working with. I just need to know the kinds of questions that get asked. So yeah,
Right.
you guys have helped a
And
lot.
you know, there is a degree of selfishness to that. Of course, we want to help you. We want to make you look good. We want to be able to answer the employer member's question expediently and fully, like almost beyond their wildest dreams. All right, here it is. But selfishly, we can then take that as a takeaway and use it for any future enrollments. So, I mean, for us, of course, we want to help, but it only makes us better for each consecutive enrollment we do, including the current one that's right in front of our face. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that just that inner working, intercommunication is so, so important. Um, Now I know we're getting toward the top of the hour. Does anybody have any other questions for Evan? And I mean, this can range anywhere, really from beginning to end in group long-term care, group sales, group conversations. It can be legitimately everything. I think Evan is one of the few who has touched literally every single piece of the processes that Mark and I teach about. So he's a great source of knowledge if you want to pick his brain. I can't believe nobody wants to ask any questions. It seems like everybody knows everything. Nobody else with a question for Evan. He has seen and done it all, and he's just getting started.
Well, actually, I do have a question because I know absolutely nothing about group health insurance, and have relied on you guys for some beginning stages of long-term care, traditional. I am hiring a full-time group health insurance specialist here in the office here in the next week or two, and really need to need to know how to point them out in the field and questions to ask and how to get those groups started. My thought was we just send them out and introduce them to business owners here in our community and try and start that conversation, but maybe that's not the most efficient way to go. So we're looking for some ways to tee this up and then, drive off the tee and get started.
So I do have some experience here actually. Actually, through my other role that I do in my career, I work a lot with business owners. What I will say is it's probably not a very high effective strategy to go after business owners cold. If you were to try to call Mark cold and he doesn't know who you are, you're probably not going to get him on the phone. At best, you're going to get the executive assistant. You're not necessarily going to get the business owner, which, by the way, side note, executive assistants can be a very powerful way into the business owner. So often people will, I'll call it, sometimes in this industry, people will almost disregard the executive assistant. Well, you're not allowed to tell me no, so I'm not accepting that. Actually, build that relationship with that executive assistant. Make them feel good. Make them feel powerful. Make them feel heard. Make them seek out what their needs are. The best way to the business owner is through their executive assistant. If my executive assistant puts something on my calendar, I do it, right? Like she kind of controls my calendar in that way, right? So, but if someone just calls me cold, unless it's in one of the states that I'm working one of these programs, I don't usually pick up, right? I've usually got other things going on, other things on my plate, and if you email them cold, you're certainly not going to reach them. Um, so I would say start with the executive assistants. Be okay with the executive assistant. Treat the executive assistant like they're a business owner. And you will, if you treat them right, you will find yourself in a position where you actually get onto that business owner's calendar. So that's the first thing I would say as far as getting your foot in the door with business owners. The much more effective strategy with business owners is to already have some version of relationship. You are part of the same association, you're a part of the same group, like golf club or whatever it might be, because having a tie-in to I met you here or we're a part of the same group is a better lead-in for a business owner than just a who handles your healthcare insurance. By the way, everyone's doing that conversation. Who handles your healthcare? Who handles your benefits? What would it take for me to be a part of that that conversation. And usually they'll just dismiss it and go, I've got my guy, that kind of thing. But the other thing is, you can also lead with a very specific product like long-term care. You can go to the business owner and say, hey, by the way, I would imagine most of the business owners in your community are not doing something specific for their employees for long-term care. Okay. So you can say, hey, by the way, do you have a long-term care benefit available to you right now to all of your people if you do get to that business owner? It's a much more likely that they'll say no to that, and they'll allow you to do just the long-term care. Don't touch anything else but just the long-term care. And if you do a good enough job with that, you might get additional questions like, well, can you help me with this? That's actually what happened with this association of mine. Is we started with the long-term care, and then they said, oh, can you help us with our group benefits? Right. We were actually looking to transition away from our group benefits at this point. But we didn't want to tell the carrier we're doing that. So can you help? So we shopped the marketplace for them, right? So some of those opportunities will come up after you've done long-term care. Some of them will come up because you already have a warm introduction or a warm conversation with that business owner. And some of them will come up because you did a great job of taking care of their executive assistant. Their executive assistants are people too. Okay. And that's the thing they seem to forget is take care of the person that takes care of them, and you'll find yourself with a foot into that door, at least at some point down the road, not necessarily right away. It might take some time to get there. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I thought that was an awesome answer. There's a lot that goes into that, but I think my biggest takeaway from what you said there is start with long-term care specialty and don't be general in a way that's going to kind of like bring up the gatekeeper mentality. Hey, I specialize in group long-term care. This is, kind of my area of expertise for many of you on the call today. I would recommend that because I know your level of acumen with long-term care. So your ability to do a really good job with the long-term care, even just the conversation and the education up front. I agree with Evan. It opens up doors to be asked about other benefits because it's something that companies generally will have to evaluate year in and year out. Maybe not to the level of their group health insurance, but they do open up the book every year for annual enrollment and think, is it time to look for something different in X, Y, or Z department? And they're going to go and ask and inquire from the people who have given them a really good experience at the end of the day. So I couldn't agree more. I thought that was great. So we are like right here at the top of the hour. And Evan, I really appreciate you taking the time just to impart your experience on the audience. Mark and I can get up here and preach what we've learned, but I think for somebody who has worked alongside us and has done a really, really good job with it and has started to kind of build their own kind of sector of their business out for this, I think it was really important for folks to hear what you had to say. And if you want to leave everybody with one last message, definitely feel free if there's like one big takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaway I've already mentioned a couple times is keep your ear to the ground. Be listening to what people are after. Be listening to what they're trying to solve for. Don't try to just squish your product into, whatever they're solving for. And when you genuinely listen to people and what they're after, the opportunities will present itself. And then be willing to ask questions. Hey, when you said that, Mr. Mrs. Business Owner, did you mean to say that this, or did you mean to say that you don't have long-term care? Like, what, give me some clarity. Like, people don't seem to have a problem with you asking for clarity on things. But AINS is a classic example of that. So be listening and be learning and move your practices forward. Hopefully this was helpful. And best of luck.
Awesome. Super appreciated again. Thank you everybody for being here and joining us. And be well, and we'll see you this time next week. Have a good one. Appreciate y'all.
Bye, guys.